morning, everybody. Hello. The first item on the agenda today is the election of a chair for the panel. Does anybody would like to nominate anybody? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to nominate Sarah Mansel.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Sarah? Councillor Chester? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chair? In that case, with a show of hands, is everyone happy that Sarah Mansel is our chair for the forthcoming year? That is very much carried. Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Suffolk Police and Crime Panel, and a warm welcome to those members who've recently been appointed to the panel. This meeting is being broadcast live and is available to watch on the Council's YouTube channel whilst we are in public session. A recording of the meeting will also be available online after the meeting. Members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded, provided due courtesy and respect are shown to others in attendance in line with the Council's published guidance. Can I remind you all to speak clearly into the microphones and avoid placing things such as papers or IT equipment in front of the microphone, as that will affect the sound quality. Please turn your mobile phones and laptops to silent if you have not already done so. We are not expecting a fire drill. In the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the room by following the fire exit signs. Fire evacuation instructions can also be found on page 4 of the agenda. Agenda item number 2 is the election of a vice chair of the panel. I would like to propose Simon Furlong as vice chair. Do I have a seconder? I think it's Franstine. Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? So I now have to say,
Just
right.
by a show of hands.
Right, there's only one nomination, so by show of hands, could you all say whether you're happy to have Simon Furlong as the vice chair?
Unanimous, lovely.
So thank you very much for that. I can now confirm that Simon Furlong is duly elected as the vice chair of the panel for the 25-26 municipal year. So now we move on to public questions, and there are none received. Now we have item number 4, apologies for absence and substitutions. So we have Councillor Debbie McCallum, who is being substituted by Councillor Joe Mason, and we have apologies from Councillor Seamus Bennett. And I think everyone else is here, are they?
Rachel Smith-Lyte's not here, but I haven't had apologies.
I thought I saw her. Yes, she is.
Is she?
I thought I saw her.
Oh, she may well appear then.
Item number 5, declarations of interest and dispensations. Franstine.
Okay, sorry. Just to declare that I am a panel member for the Independent Community Advisors panel, and I what was the other one? The Stop and Search Police Use of Powers panel member as well.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, so I move to item number 6, the minutes of the previous meeting. If any member wishes to comment on the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting we held on the 20th of March 2026, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to take it that the panel is content to approve the minutes as a correct record. So that anyone who's not happy that the published minutes are a correct record, please raise your hand now. If not, we'll take that they are accepted. Thank you very much. And then we move to item number 7, the scrutiny of theme 3 of the PCC's 25-29 Police and Crime Panel. At agenda item 7, we will support the PCC's function to deliver a public engagement plan. The panel will also review the PCC's new website, which went live in January 2026. I'd like to draw the panel's attention to the areas of focus which we've set out on pages 21 to 22 of the papers. And before I open the floor for the panel for questions, I would like to invite the PCC to address the panel on this topic. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the new members of this august panel. Very pleased to be meeting you and hopefully working with you during the next year or two or whatever happens. So there we are. I think it's really important to say that this particular part of the work that we do as a team is pretty fundamental. Communication with the public, bearing in mind that the role of the PCC is to link as the public with the police, that bridge, that conduit for things that are good, things that need improvement, change, and so on is really, really important. And I just introduce Sandra Graffin, my colleague here on the right, who has been with us from the beginning and is in charge of communications, again, our Assistant Chief Executive, who sadly, from my point of view, of course, is retiring at the end of this month, as some of you will know. But we are, I just want to say this, indebted to everything that Sandra has contributed over the last nearly 14 years. It's made a real difference. And as you probably, some of you may have met Darren, our Chief Executive, as well. So to get back to the agenda, the engagement and the communication is fundamental. There is no question of that. We spend a lot of time as a team engaging with people in a variety of methods. So I don't want to give you a shopping list, but for some of you, I will just go through what we do, and it's not a comprehensive list. You've got the communications plan in your papers there. One of the most important things we do in the autumn is a series of open public meetings. We have 3 or 4 dotted around the county. Anybody can come. We bring the Chief Constable or other equivalent senior officer and local inspector along, and it's an open forum. People can ask any questions, raise any issues they like. We don't discuss individual incidents, because that's inappropriate, but there is always time afterwards. If people wish to do that, that can be done in confidence. In addition to that, there are a series of regular events throughout the year. The street meets, they are somewhat erratic, partly because we piggyback on the back of the constabulary when they arrange them. We try to give as much notice as possible, but sometimes at short notice, the constabulary, for operational reasons, may not do that. They change the dates. But they are very, very important. On a regular basis, we meet with all the business improvement districts right across the county, be it in Newmarket, Lowestoft, Ipswich, Bury, regular meetings with the chambers of commerce and other business representatives, because, as I've said many times before, good policing and keeping crime levels low does actually help the economy grow. And my goodness me, we need to do that as much as possible. And the feedback from that is really important, because that does help shape some of the initiatives that policing has had over the years. I'll come back to that in a minute. I also am very happy to go and talk with any groups of councillors. We have, on most occasions, had an annual update for all councils. That hasn't perhaps happened in the last year, but the open invitation has been there always to come and talk to councils. Q&A, don't have to have a predetermined agenda unless there's something specifically technical, because I really welcome that, because that dialogue, and it's all about, in summary, what is best for Suffolk overall. And people will have different views, people will have some, perhaps some perceptions of what policing is being done, and you can explain what needs to be done better and take on board what needs to happen. Also very happy to do meetings if you get groups of councillors, be they district, borough or county councils, where you put some together so you get better value for money, for time and so on. For example, last year we had a meeting up in North Suffolk in the Waveney Valley, where there were 3 or 4 district councils got together with representatives, I think, from 7 or 8 parishes overall, That's a very good use of time. We've done that in the past. Very happy to do that again. In Ipswich, for example, we used to have the area committees. I don't believe they're happening now, but they were quite a good conduit to come across, again, not to just tell people what we're doing, but to pick up ideas, because one of the key things for communication, and you'll see that in the papers there, it is about listening to people, but also hearing what they say and trying to do what people want. We don't, of course, have a Harry Potter magic wand to just do everything everybody wants, but it is about explaining to people what can be done and what can't be done. And some examples of feedback. We are all concerned about improving police visibility. That's not just the uniform presence, and I've said before, the visible appearance, in inverted commas, for example, on online crime, knowing that people can be detected, things like fraud, sexual abuse, these really, really important issues that have to be dealt with, and pretty awful crimes and so on. So that's vital. So we are open to engage in any medium that can be done as long as we can fit it in the diary. Spoken to voluntary groups yesterday. David Ronell was over in Haverhill talking to the One Haverhill Partnership, a multi-agency group which is there looking at the betterment of our fourth biggest town in Suffolk. Very important that it isn't all just about the big settlements. Bury, Ipswich, Lowestoft's out on the limb, as is Haverhill. Really, really important. The rural dimension, of course, me with my farming background, very, very important that is taken into account. It's a major part of our economy and way of life, and they deserve the policing like everybody else. They pay their dues and taxes like everybody else, and that's really, really, really crucial. If you look at some of the public sector multi-agency groups, regular attenders and contributors, I think is important to say, to things like the Health and Wellbeing Board, which met last week. Suffolk public sector leaders needs to be reinvigorated, and I'll come back to that again in a minute. Safer, Stronger Communities Board, and another one that doesn't involve that many people, but does involve youth justice and criminal justice, the local Criminal Justice Board, which covers Norfolk and Suffolk, and I've chaired that for the last, well, many years I can remember actually, partly because there's always been a change, and there's yet another change in the Norfolk Office of Police and Crime Commission, the Police and Crime Commissioner up there. And that is where, again, you can bring forward the issues regarding court backlogs, and thank you very much for your letter that we will perhaps talk about later. But it's really important that our counties do get our fair share of national resources, which, in my humble opinion, we don't really do at the moment. The community safety partnerships, try to have an annual update with them, the three of them in Suffolk. And for those who don't know, they have an important contribution to what we do for our extensive grants and commissioning work. So when it comes to the crime and disorder reduction grant that we have a budget of £300,000 for that each year, and some one-off extra payments. The chairs of the CSPs do have a very important input to looking at what grants we give, particularly for young people, those who are disadvantaged, some for ethnic minorities, particular focus there. Also for victim services, that feedback is really important. So, for example, if you're looking at the difficulties in Suffolk as a whole, places like the Waverley Domestic Abuse and Violence Forum, Restore over in Bury, Phoebe, based in Ipswich with a county-wide approach, Compassion over in Sudbury, and many, many more to deal with things like domestic abuse, violence, sexual offences, and then looking at some of the other offences, the work we do with people like Brave Futures, really, really important. We've supported them for some time. And as feedback and dialogue with them, actually giving grants for 3 years or more does help them. That's relatively unusual, but they need the certainty because charities and voluntary groups are under huge pressure, and the contribution they make to our society in Suffolk is second to none. So we do a great deal on that, and that will continue as long as I'm privileged to be in this role. One or two other points I would just like to mention. Sandra can talk about this in much more detail. The recent revamp of the website, I think, has received some very positive accolades. The additional work now being done on social media is absolutely fundamental. And then on specific items where we represent what the public, try to represent what the public wants, let's take the A14, that notorious issue, and the Orwell Crossing. Now that's a meeting convened, I think, twice a year by the Chambers of Commerce. It does have good representation. I think it's important that MPs do attend these meetings because they are in a position to lobby the Department of Transport directly. And can I just say, I think the attendance at that meeting has been patchy, which is unhelpful. However, if we are going to get the intractable problem of a northern bypass, a tunnel, extra bridge around Ipswich, there needs to be agreement from everybody on the solution, because otherwise it's not going to get very far. Governments, regardless of colour, will say, well, if you can't agree amongst yourselves, why are we going to do anything on that? It also helps put pressure as direct feedback, for example, from the Haulage Association business and people in general about roads policing, the capacity, the lack of support we get from National Highways to their traffic officers. But we have got to work better together on that and come up with some solutions. And I was just thinking the other day, I happened to be up in Norfolk, but on the A47 at the Thickthorn roundabout, which is west of Norwich. The reason that is going ahead, a huge investment there, I'm told by my regular update meetings with National Highways regional directors, in Norfolk they actually agreed what they wanted to do there. There had to be some compromises, but I think there's a lesson there. If we want to move forward with these things, we've got to find solutions collectively, and there has to be a degree of compromise. I'm only saying that, everybody, because I think that shows that power of collaboration, working together, will make a difference. Just moving on, various surveys that we do over the years. Sandra's had the annual council tax survey, where we have had some pretty good responses. A lot of people, that helps shape the decisions on council tax. And I suppose one of the major, or the two major highlights for public engagement are at the Suffolk show and at the Hadley show. And if you're looking at outcomes from these things, one of the areas where the Constabulary has to perform far better is on firearms licensing. Now that may not affect everybody, but it's an important part of the rural economy. And as a result of that feedback with other organisations, including the CLA, NFU, Countryside Alliance, the Constabulary is at long last starting to take some steps to do something about the backlog. They're by no means the worst performing unit in the country. It's a joint one with Norfolk, but jolly well needs to get a grip on this and sort it out. If you look at feedback as a result of that, it can lead to some academic research. If we go back a few years, the ridiculous decision by the previous government to close the courthouse in Bury and in Lowestoft, I never agreed with that. I don't care what the politics are. It's reprehensible, and they wonder why we have a huge backlog in magistrates' courts without a sensible solution. I don't agree, I never did agree with that, but we did do some research as a result of the feedback there, commissioned through the University of Suffolk, to look at what the impact would be of closing those two courthouses, and surprise, surprise, our approach on that was fully vindicated, because some of you will know, if you live in the more remote corners of Suffolk, be it Brandon, Haverhill and Lowestoft, I know they can move up to Great Yarmouth, but if you are reliant on public transport, it's extremely difficult to go to a court case, be you a victim, a witness or a defendant, and guaranteed to do that in a day. And the justice system should be available to everybody, regardless, and it's just not acceptable. Right back at the beginning, the huge concern there was about domestic violence and abuse. To this day, 10 years on, 12 years on, the piece of research done by the university and victims' perceptions of the criminal justice system, all agencies, of those who've been victims of domestic violence, is second to none. It's a huge piece of work, and that has helped shape what we've done. And as a result of that, when I started 14 years ago, we had one independent domestic violence advisor, and partly because of this research, we've now got 16, 17, and that's a really, really important thing, again, if you look at the economics of that. And I think the last thing I will say, because I've asked Sandra to comment on that, be it the annual report or whatever. If you look at some of the other programmes that we've had, I mentioned visibility at the beginning. Everybody wants more visibility. There is a degree of pushback, should I say, from some members of the constabulary, but actually if that's what the public want and that's what they need, we need to explain it and communicate how it will help. We're never going to go back to the days of Dixon and Dock Green because the pattern of crime has changed so much. When old Jack Warner was there, some of you may not know what I'm talking about, some of you will, but we didn't have things like mobile phones, the internet, cybercrime just didn't exist. So we have to balance that, bearing in mind that 99% of all crime has a digital footprint. And the very final point I want to make about public engagement, before I hand over to Sandra, is when it comes to complaints or issues, we are always available to take things forward. If people have got issues and they've been through the constabulary, that's the first thing to do. But if that doesn't work, then we are there to represent the public. And I've said that I think at nearly every police and crime panel meeting, if people are not satisfied, drop us a line and we will try to make things come to a suitable solution. That can be tricky because you've got this problem of where do you define operational independence versus the public interest. And I've said for many years, most things are not black or white, they are a shade of grey. So we have some fairly interesting discussions behind the scenes on that. I'll leave that there, Sarah, and then I'll just hand over to Sandra for some other comments. I'm sure you're bursting to make them. I'll turn that.
Actually, Tim, I think you've covered that really well. It may be better if I just help with answering the questions. I'm sure you've got lots of questions.
Okay.
Thank you. In our papers, we've split our scrutiny areas into 4 themes. And I'm just thinking that maybe we'll try and have a bit of structure to our discussion. And maybe we can start off with any questions about our scrutiny areas 1 and 2, which I think have quite a lot of overlap, on the public engagement plans for 26-27 and the publication of public engagement events. So I know there's going to be overlap with our other areas, but we'll try and stick to start with, has anyone got any questions around the public engagement plans and how they're publicised for the forthcoming year? Councillor Chester, I think you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Tim, on the theme of public engagement, I'm quite interested to know how you approach your public meetings. Do you go with a set agenda? Is it regional? Do you target between rural and town, the content? Or do you listen? Do you collate results? We posed this question before about collating results from the meetings that you have for future analysis to establish trends, regional crime. I don't know if you do that. So there's a lot in there to unpack. That's one question. The other question relates to and it's on the theme of engagement, is the website. Keep an eye on the website. It is a study in clarity. It's very clear. It's very functional. But I did put this to an expert on websites. My 13-year-old, very computer-savvy grandson, who looked at the website and whilst not understanding a lot of the content, he understands the concepts, the menus, and the colour and the layout. He found it very good. But he did pose the pointed question, is it up to date? And there lies my next question. How current is it? How often is the website updated? That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think those might actually have come under scrutiny areas 3 and 4, but we'll take the questions now anyway, if that's okay. Is that going to be Sandra or Tim?
I'll do the first bit and then ask Sandra to comment on the website because nobody asked me about that. Way beyond. No, but thanks for the question, Mike, and thanks Sarah for taking it now. Otherwise, I might forget. Yes. So the public engagements, the 3 we have, there's 3 policing areas in Suffolk. We make sure there's at least 1 in each policing area. It's quite a job because it's such a huge county is where you locate them, but we do try to mix it up, and Sandra may want to comment on that a little more in future. So we do move it around. For example, we had one in Haverhill 2 years ago, and I think we only had about 10 people turn up for that. But other times we've been there, for example, we've had 40 or 50. So it varies. Sometimes if people have got an issue, they'll turn up. We had one at Morton Hall a few years ago because hair coursing was a major problem. Loads came to that. We've had some in Ipswich, variable attendance, but actually lots of people come. So there's no specific agenda. The format is always the same, that there will be a brief introduction, giving around one of our annual leaflets. People have a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits, so I'm to try and make it a little bit informal, and that's an aside. But there's an introduction, of an update, if you like, from myself and the Chief Constable, then a brief update from the area inspector, because they will have the details of what's happening in the vicinity. and then it's an open forum for questions. And very often we can have loads and loads of questions. So I can remember one up in the Kirkley Centre, we had about 50 people there. In the end, we had to say, look, we've been here for 2 hours, and I think that's enough because... but the important thing here is all the questions are taken down, and we do use them to help formulate policy and processes going forward, not necessarily in the immediate time scale, but it is important. And that coupled with, I forgot to mention this, that each month we have an analysis of all the written correspondence, or be that email, letters, etc., which is far more than the previous system and the police authority there. We get 80 to 100 inquiries a week like that, a month, and they're analysed into categories, and that helps form it. So that's why Visibility, the new policing model, was formed just over a couple of years ago. Helped with the increase in officer numbers, of course, but that was really, really important because that's people want. We've now got the 2 new town centre teams that, funny enough, we mentioned over at Haverhill yesterday, and that is in response to the fact that people want more done regarding shoplifting, theft, which is what it is, these sorts of things. Right Care, Right Person was another initiative as a result of feedback we got from various meetings and with health colleagues regarding helping people with mental health difficulties, which is not necessarily a policing issue. If there's a crime or something like that going on, or there's a threat to life, of course they'll respond, but for a lot of them, actually get the right people who are qualified to deal with that. So all that information, Mike, is fed back in, and that does help formulate policy. And I can think some years ago, we had issues in the control room. That is why we made sure there were many more operators with 101. So there's now has to be 140 call handlers on the books always, with 1 or 2 others, because it wasn't where we wanted it to be. But also, the way society's changed, digital communication, can't we do more on that? And that's why we've got the DigiDesk and much more response for social media. So all of that information is collated, taken into account, and now I'm going to hand over to Sandra on the website because, well, that was your pigeon, really.
Are we going to do the website now, or shall we do it?
Would it be better to do all the stuff about the website at the end?
Yeah,
because
that's
I think
okay
there's quite
with you.
a number of things that I've certainly want to pick up on from what Tim said, and we've got Councillor Smith and Councillor Mason have already put their hands up, so we'll go to them first, and then I think we'll just talk about the website and what we think of it towards the end, and we've got Simon. So Councillor Smith next.
Oh, should I answer Mike first?
Oh, do you want to?
Just very quickly,
Yeah.
with regards to the public meetings, policing is divided into 3 areas: east, west and south. There isn't a north for some strange reason, but anyway, there's 3 areas, so we always have a meeting in one of those areas. And because, as Tim said, it's a massive county, as we all know, we tend to do one in the middle. So this year we've got a meeting in Lowestoft, a meeting in Ipswich, a meeting in Newmarket, which is the west meeting, and then we'll have one in Stowmarket, because if you look at the map, it's pretty much in the middle. So we try to make it, we also record them. We have online meetings which we record. Yep. So if people can't physically get to one of the sit-down meetings, we do have 2 online meetings per year, which people can attend, ask questions of Tim and the Chief. Those are then put on the website so people can pick them up afterwards. So it is a challenge. We do get a variety of questions. We get the actual attendance fluctuates massively, but we do try to place them in areas where we think there are particular concerns. We had one in Ipswich on the Nacton estate a couple of years ago, particularly because there were issues in that area that we found that a lot of people were contacting us, so we placed our meeting there that year. So we do try to place them in areas where the majority of people can get to us, but accepting that the county is massive and there will always be a bit of a journey.
Thank you. So we'll leave the website, comments on the website, I think, towards the end of the meeting. So I've got Councillor Smith next.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, Tim. Long time no see. I see you just launched a new survey, Community Safety Public Perception Survey, which is in collaboration with councils, whatever. Just, I noticed that it's a telephone-based service and some face-to-face interviews. Just wondering how do you select who actually you call for these interviews, and how do you make sure you get a true representation of all the different communities across the county?
I think that's really important. I'm going to ask Darren to fill in the detail on that, because this is a fundamental piece of work that I hope is going to benefit everybody in the county, regardless of which agency or sector we're in, because we need to understand what people think. Now, I don't know, I've questioned it needs to be statistically relevant and properly tested out. The funding for this has come from the Pool Business Rates Fund, which is used at the behest of the public sector leaders. And I think this will really help shape things going forward. I think it's also particularly important because of whatever does happen with local government review and so on, and the changes, and I will get this one in like a fish slice, this ridiculous idea of police mega forces and so on. What we need to do is make sure that we're on the journey of a continual improvement. Whilst the force performs very well, there is always room for improvement, and we know having the second, third lowest recorded crime rate is fine, but we do know that recorded crime is only half of total crime. So there's no need for complacency on that. And I hope that this survey will actually provide some comprehensive answers, definitely relevant, making sure it is completely kosher. There's no question of that. So Darren, you've been leading the charge on that, so over to you.
Hi. So we've engaged a professional market research company called SMSR, so that's on behalf of all of the councils. The sampling methodology we're using is based on the census data. So we've set in the spec that we commissioned that we procured on earlier in the year, the demographic groups we wanted to reach. So they have targets for each area and each demographic group per quarter. So they have a sampling target for each of those. The way the phone and the face-to-face interviews work is that they primarily do the phone ones, then they find the gaps, because there will be groups that are harder to reach, especially if we're just, if we're using that methodology. And then the face-to-face are used to go out and actually target specific groups so we get that balance. And then what normally happens with these surveys is when you get to the end of the quarter, you've got pretty close to your sampling targets, but they're not quite, it's hard to hit those exactly on target. So then you weight the results based on the actual number of people you've talked to. So it is very targeted. We will hit those targets. So where it's, we're, I think, the 8th area in the country that use this company. So they have a really good pedigree and credibility. So we will hit those targets, but also it's probably just important to recognise that the confidence in the results we get will grow over the period of time that we have the survey. So we've targeted a confidence rating of 5 and below, so that's where it is very statistically viable. But that will take 12 months, especially when we look at some of our smaller demographic groups in the county. So we'll get some indicative results, but they will grow in confidence as we go forward. That was a bit of a technical answer, sorry.
That's right. So open on the 1st of July, so I can't see a closing date for it. You said it's going to take about 12 months to actually work out what the results are. So how long is the survey open for?
So we've commissioned the research to last for 2 years. The plan is it is a longitudinal survey. So to use a comparison, the Essex survey has been running for 9 years. So there is no closing date. So 2 years is what we've commissioned initially. It went into field on the 6th of July. We get the first results back at the end of September, beginning of October. That gets presented to the Safer Stronger Communities Board, who are the governance, from the council's agreed governance route for that. And I've said previously that I would be really happy to share both the script for the survey and the results when they come in. And the whole plan is that all of this data gets put into the Suffolk Observatory and is freely accessible to anybody who wants to do it. So it is for the benefit of all of us involved.
There is no closing date. It's not open.
There is no closing date Sorry, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say, but the important point here is not going to wait for 2 years before nothing's done. And the idea of you wait for 9 years, well, that's not what it. So as soon as the results start to get fed through, we'll be using that to adjust things accordingly. I'm very happy to share that with everybody. And don't forget, all districts and boroughs are represented. They all agreed with this. So we need to do that together, is to use the results as they come through to help shape things. So I wouldn't want anyone, in case anybody happens to be listening to the broadcast today, that we're going to wait for 2 years or even 5 years or 9 years. That's not the point of it. It's an ongoing process, but we need to be using it, I don't know what the word is, using it as we accumulate the evidence that will help shape us. Just to reassure everybody.
Yes, apologies if that wasn't clear. Absolutely, the whole point of it is that we take action on the back of it. So everybody's been involved, so we've chosen the questions to enable us to actually take action. So it's about being able to help people who are making operational decisions on the ground actually have better data to target and to plan interventions. So the first set of quarterly results will come out in October, and we will get them quarterly from then onwards. The purpose of it being longitudinal isn't to wait, it's so we can act, and then we can see what impact that action has had, and we can then evaluate what we're doing on the back of that to see what's actually shifting. And there is, along with the funding for the survey, an intervention fund that's been allocated to it, so we actually have some money to look and target, identify some areas that we want to target, put some interventions in place, and then track if the interventions have had a meaningful statistical difference on community confidence.
Thank you. Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Chair. So, can you try and describe to me how the PCC closes the engagement loop? So, residents are encouraged to raise concerns, attend meetings, and respond to consultations, but what reporting is undertaken afterwards so they can see that the concern was raised, what action was taken in response, and what difference that action has made. And now I'm aware that, of course, there's time scale involved in that, but I think from a public's point of view, if you raise questions, you want some sense of certainty and that sense of reporting back, and not necessarily passively have to go to a website necessarily and see it reported. How do you go about closing that engagement loop?
I think that's a very good question, and I'm not sitting on the fence here. It depends on the context. So if we would say, I'll give a good example, correspondence. Over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been an increasing number. I take the firearms licence unit. Why is it that people have to wait for such a protracted process? As a result of that, Joe, we convened a meeting with British Association of Shooting and Conservation, NFU, CLA, Countryside Alliance, back in January, over at their headquarters near Bury St Edmunds, and that actually really did put a catalyst, should we say, I was going to say rocket, but the catalyst under the constabulary, and that is now being taken far more seriously as a direct result of feedback. So that was a collaboration, and all the membership organisations know that, and we explained that at the Suffolk show. As an example, for specific cases, and I'm not saying we get absolutely everything right, if we get an inquiry into to us because they haven't got what they want from the constabulary, very often that does get handed on to the constabulary, but we track that, and I would be dismayed, and I don't think this happens, I'm not saying they get the full answer every time, but we do follow that up, and sometimes we have to chase the constabulary. Look, you were asked this 2 or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 1 or 2 people here will be aware of that, and you're back sometimes to this issue of what's operational and what isn't, but the public interest. So we can pressurise them. Sometimes it does take too long, but that is not through us not trying to put the pressure on. So that's a very important, particularly where there's an individual case. And I think it's incumbent on policing, if mistakes are made, hold your hand up and apologise. We got it wrong, move on, but we want solutions. And I think in other areas, I mentioned the town centre team, whether we could find, I think it's quite complicated. How do you say, well, everybody asked this, we did that? But the general terms like visibility, that's what's happened. So, for example, yesterday at the Haverhill meeting where David was at it, about the visibility, we talked about roads policing. That is about capacity, but I think the communication angle there to explain what people get as a result of that intervention is crucial. So it's a bit of a mix and match situation. All the stuff from the public meetings gets fed through to the constabulary and ourselves. We had feedback sessions after the Suffolk show. I mean, Sandra may want to talk a little bit more about how that works. The correspondence, as I said, is all analysed in categories. Whether we could do a bit more to explain that, but there are various initiatives that take place that make a big difference. So, for example, if we look at the county lines threat, that was a multi-agency approach, and it was a result of our intervention. We got that money secured through the Pool Business Rates Fund to start that going, I think, about 8 years ago. Still more to do, but we've made a heck of a lot of progress on that. But again, that's where the multi-agency approach comes in. So the unit that's been set up, Criminal Exploitation Hub, was a direct result of that, because so many people were concerned about what was happening to youngsters through this thoroughly wicked and evil trade. A lot of it done by organised crime groups. So there's that. And I think it's also true to say, because of the feedback we have when it comes to our grants and commissioning, that's made a huge difference for, particularly what we're doing for young people and so on, things in the papers. And more local to you, the Haverhill Blue Light thing, initiative we're going to talk about when we do the verbal update on estates. That is a good example of where people have said locally, what can we do? And that hand of partnership there is really, really important. So I can't give you a specific answer, but in general, there's that. And I don't know, Sandra, if you want to add anything to that, please.
The questions people ask are absolutely vast, but they generally fall into two camps. They're either operational, or they are they're things that they feel affect them in their own communities, but are not necessarily linked to a particular incident. And I think a really good example, particularly panel members who have been with us for some time, we used to have so many complaints about the 101 service, and they would come in through the correspondence. Every public meeting we went to, it would start with people talking about 101, and it would just escalate, because somebody would say they'd waited for 20 minutes and somebody else would say they'd waited for half an hour. It was a real issue that came through at every point. People bumping into us in the street, everyone spoke about 101. So we realised it was a definite theme that was threading through the whole county. And through Precept, we made significant investment into the 101, and it is markedly different now. We had public meetings last year, and I think across the 4 meetings, one person mentioned 101, and that was to say 101 is working really well. So I think that it is more about the themes that come up rather than an individual answer to an individual question. We build that evidence, and then we use that evidence to work with the constabulary to make changes.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Mason?
Yeah, just very briefly. Thank you for that. To be honest, it's a little bit of an unfair question, because, of course, so many issues are ongoing and they're never particularly solved, because it's like whack-a-mole, something else can pop up related to the same issue somewhere else. One of the things I particularly value is community police officers attending parish council meetings and providing a conduit for giving that feedback about what has been going on in the community and responses to concerns. And I'd certainly encourage, certainly across Suffolk, where possible, for community police officers to be that, to provide some of that ongoing reporting as regards, to give that sense of confidence that things are being looked at and addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, those community police officers, that came in as a direct result of that. Now, it's certainly not the time available to attend every parish council or town council meeting, but the whole point of having these 80 community policing officers under the, as I said, relatively new policing model was to improve that engagement. Years ago, of course, you used to get a police officer go, certainly to the AGMs of all parishes and town councils, and would give a report. So there's a bit of a balance there. But the, I suppose the point here is, Joe, if there's a specific issue, then they, if at all possible, are expected to turn up, even if they're only there for part of the meeting. Whatever the issue happens to be, then that's there. That is part of their role, to communicate the clues in the title. That engagement side of it is absolutely fundamental. So 3 years ago, I think we had 13, 14 engagement officers across the county. Now we've got 80, and the whole county is divided into 50 discrete policing areas on a very local basis to get that relationship, for want of a better word, so that everybody's there, and all the details of that are on the constabulary website as to who that person is. So that is an improvement. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's always room to do better. But that was a direct result of people saying, look, why aren't they there? So that, I think, has definitely helped. But that's their remit. If at all possible, can't give an absolute guarantee, but if they can't, for operational reasons, attend, please put in a brief report on what the issues are. And if you're not getting that, well then you need to talk to your local inspector, and if that fails, then let us know and we'll follow it up. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that the community officer has come to Elmswell Parish Council on at least 2 occasions in the last 12 months. So that is definitely an improvement on what was 3 or 4 years ago. So it is working in some places. So thank you. Simon Furlong, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to take you back to kind of the public engagement plan and how you decide. We've got, we heard at the APP recently about trust and confidence, and also about the disproportionality in relation to stop and search and police powers. I don't want to go into that too much, but it's really how you ensure engagement with those seldom heard groups, communities. You've given us a really good list of those you engage with, but I'm interested to hear how you are trying to get out to those groups, because to build trust and confidence, you know, we need to be really engaging and working very hard at, you know. Previously you've called them hard to reach. Well, it's not hard to reach, we're just not hearing them. So how do we get out there and how are we engaging with them? Because that will have a direct effect then on the trust and confidence that our communities see around.
No, I mean, that's a very important question, and we are available to speak to any group as long as we can fit in. We do that proactively, so the relationships with this group, I've got another session coming up with them very soon. How can we do more to that? And it isn't about not expecting people to come and see you. Actually, you've got to go out and see them. So we've got the local police race action plan. We're looking forward to the suggestions from them. Franstine, I know, sits on the panel there. But there's a lot of these groups that we do go out and see. I mean, I've recently been to Sikh Temple, BSC, Multicultural Services. The feedback we get, of course, members on this panel are very good conduits. What is it that you're hearing? Do tell us. We have to cover the whole county, so your help on that is very much appreciated. We are now, as a result of the meeting, I think in January, analysing what we're doing for this current financial year. Obviously, it's fairly near the beginning. And the relationship, as I say, with the grants and commissioning, following feedback from them, is really, really important. So we include all that. And the whole point of that is not to give financial support to those who could probably do things anyway. It is very much of those who are in disadvantaged communities, minority, protected characteristics, where appropriate, we will do what we can to help on that. Very often that's a multi-agency approach. So if I think of the programme, we've got the Divert programme with Ipswich Town Community Foundation, that works. Positive Futures, you'll see in your papers, we give them nearly 100 grand a year. And again, we get lots of feedback, Simon, from them on all the groups, where they've been, all the protected characteristics in their annual report that we have. So that's really important. So that is a bit of work in progress, bearing in mind what we said, I think, was in January, but that is now being much better analysed there. We were doing it anyway, but just to reassure people, that's what we're doing. Trust and confidence is fundamental, and I think that's something that constabulary, we need to understand from senior officers what they are actually doing, rather than just talking about it. What are you actually going to do to improve trust and confidence? And I think one of those areas, I've mentioned firearms licensing, I won't go on about that again, but that doesn't help. If we look at the scrutiny of police powers, that's another area which we discussed. I think you were both, Franstine and Simon, were at that. So what are the recommendations? What are the improvements that need to be made? So when we get those, we'll be following that up. And what we can do as individuals as well, we will be doing all that. So I would suggest this is something we can pick up in a few months' time again, and we can show you. We'll have got enough data there to analyse and show you what we're actually doing. And I'm a great believer, as I said just a few minutes ago, you can go out and see any community. I've never found any community that's refused to meet with you. But I do need some help. We need some help. Who are the people that we need to go and liaise with? And that's one of the reasons we're having a regular update with ISCRI and other organisations. I mean, I could give you a whole list. I won't go through that now, but that's the way that works. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sandra, at all? Or?
No, I think that.
No, that covers it, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned earlier the online meetings that you have a couple a year. How are those advertised to residents, and how would a resident access the meeting?
Sandra do all that, yes, they are advertised, yes.
Yes, we have those online meetings are the chief and the PCC, so they're sold as, you know, meet the chief and the PCC, so very high level from a constabulary perspective. We advertise it through newsletters that we send out from our office, email newsletters. The constabulary do a lot of publicity on their social media. They have much greater following than we would. We have Suffolk Connected, which was previously Police Connect. I might have to explain that one to you, which is a two-way correspondence between the constabulary and the public. And I think there's about 6,000 individual addresses for that. We use our own social media. We send it out through the local papers. So it does get good coverage. It goes to all parish councils. We send it to the exec services of all the councils for them to send it to their every councillor with a message saying, could you please disseminate this information through your own networks. So in theory, people should get it from their county councillor, their district councillor, their parish, and through the constabulary. We have had, again, we had one meeting where we were talking about speeding. I think we had about 80. We did that with the with Suffolk. Yeah. We teamed up with Suffolk for that one. We had about 80 people, and it was amazing because the screen was like little postage stamps. There were 80 people all sitting at home, you know, asking questions, which was really, really good. But then I think the last one we had about 25 or so. But it is just another method because some people prefer that option and some people just would never engage with us online, so we have to try to cover all ports.
Thank you. I think we've now got Councillor Ray. Right hand button.
Marvellous. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, forgive me if I'm covering old ground, because the first time I've been here. I'm sitting here being asked to scrutinise your performance, and I think your performance is very good, actually. Certainly in terms of Ipswich, I've seen a marked improvement in the service we're getting over the last 2 years, without a shadow of a doubt. But there don't seem to be any metrics or performance indicators or any empirical data whatsoever that actually measure how your performance is going. I don't know whether you're doing better this year than you were last year or the year before, because there's nothing to measure it by. I just wonder if you could comment on that.
I think that's a really interesting point, Adam. Measuring it. Well, we know the number of meetings we're doing, we know the feedback. Well, I suppose it's all a matter of balance then. Do you actually measure how many requests come through and then how many are activated? I think I have to take that away and look at it. No, there isn't actually a matrix to look at all that, and it's just a matter of whether you think that's a good use of time to do that, whether that would help. I don't know if you've got any ideas of how you could do it without it becoming an enormously bureaucratic process where you have to start employing extra people I don't know, actually, being perfectly honest. There isn't a matrix as such, no. As I said, when it comes to the correspondence, that is analysed every week. You do a media update, which is a different form, but that's still a form of engagement. We have a comprehensive list of all the different publications, radio, TV interviews, or whatever it is, once a month. And that can vary from about, 25 to 70 or 80. It just depends. If there's a controversial topic, or the council tax, something like that, you can guarantee there's a lot more interest in that. So it's very, very variable. I think we'd have to take that away and think about it, because having a practical way of doing it that would be useful without being too burdensome. But I do think that's an interesting point, but I can't give you a direct answer because I don't know.
Yeah, I think clearly, it could turn out to be an endless piece of work. You could go into more and more detail if you wish to do so, but I think just sort of maybe 4 or 5 top-level indicators, maybe sort of average response time to complaints, and just things like that. It just gives us a way of looking how it's going.
If it comes to specific things directed at constabulary, yes, that is analysed, and we do have data. So when you come to accountability and performance panels, so things like complaints and so on, there is data there. So that is mainstream. So we have in the constabulary a department that I can't remember the name of now. SBOS, which stands for...
I don't know.
Quite.
Suffolk Business.
Exactly, you see.
Yeah.
They love acronyms, policing. They scatter around like...
And they change them regularly.
Confetti at wedding, yeah, and that's another. But no, that is all analysed, so we could give you some feedback on that after the meeting on things like that. So we look at complaints, corn handling. There's lots of data that does come on all that, because otherwise we can't hold the Chief Constable to account. That's good. How are you going to improve that? Simon's point about trust and confidence. Some of that is done from a national survey. We have HMIC reports, HMIC FRS, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services. One hell of a mouthful, that. Yeah. What else have I got? Strategic, SBOS stands for Strategic Business Operational Service. Splendid. So there is a huge amount of data, but for this specific engagement that we do, we will take that away and have a think about it. But I wouldn't want you to think nothing's analysed, because it jolly well is up to here.
Thank you. And now we've got Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Hiya, Tim. You mentioned earlier that roughly only half of crime actually ends up getting reported. Are you confident that all of your community outreach strategies are helping to increase those numbers here in Suffolk? And I suppose, as a follow-up, are you confident that the strategies in place are able to withstand that increased caseload?
No, I think that's a good question, Matt, and good morning. We haven't met before, apart from saying hello at the beginning. No, I think this is a national issue. We have to make it easier for people to report crime. And one of the reasons, in my view, this is a personal view, that some people don't report is they think, well, fine, what's the point? Nobody's going to do anything about it. Now, I understand that frustration. I get frustrated at times as well. However, if we are going to talk to government, this is a political point with a small p, never mind the party job on this, if we don't get people to report it, and I've said this for many, many years, it's very difficult to quantify to the Home Office, and certainly, as I colloquially call it, the dead hand of the Treasury. They want evidence as to why you need extra resources to do something. So we have to make it as easy as we can for people to report crime, and I would say collectively we have done that, but there's still a long way to go. So I mentioned, 2 years ago we didn't have a digital desk. Social media has been expanded, and there are increasing numbers of people, not myself, who want to report things online. Well, that's fine. We also we've got a live chat in the constabulary, so people can, a bit like if you want to get at a bank, because you can never get hold of anybody, and you can have a live chat. That's gone up in numbers. There's also a national, rather clunky system called Single Online Home. I think that's quite a frustrating process, but that's done nationally. It's better than nothing, but that is another avenue, as well as the traditional ways of reporting it. And as Sandra's already said, we've made major investment in the control room. When we come onto the estates, there will be a new control room, hopefully in a couple of years, based at Landmark House. So all those things are being done, but we really have got to encourage everybody to report crime, suspicious circumstances. And you may not know, but Suffolk's got one of the lowest levels of funding per resident, and that's gone on for years, going back for governments probably since the formula was done about 25 years ago or 20 years ago. And with the growth in population and so on, I don't think the funding's matched that. And it's really important with the change in the pattern of crime. Fraud is a major issue. We've got a joint initiative with the County Council on that. Important that that's developed, because we need to have that data, we need that reporting, then we can focus much more, I think, locally but nationally. We've got to do a damn sight more on crime prevention. And unless you have that data to analyse the problem and do an economic assessment, which is again something I am constructively critical of all constabularies, they don't look at the economics of it sufficiently as part of the equation, not the overall thing. So there's a long way to go on that, but we are recognising that, and we're always happy for new ideas and new methods of doing it. I'll just give you one little example. For example, we're just doing a trial for HGV compliance where there are weight restrictions. That's been done in Codnam. We've just got to wait for the results to evaluate it. That will be another thing that could then be, if it works, use that across the whole county, or potentially even beyond that. That's important. So there are all sorts of trials that we can do, but it is based on that evidence. And if you look at speeding enforcement, that's a very good example where there's been a lot of initiatives to actually make sure people are compliant. So I think that's a very good question, but we are doing as much as we can, but there is always more to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I've spotted your hand, Councillor Mason, but I'm going to go to Councillor Love because he hasn't spoken yet. So, and then I'll come back to you.
There we go. We're off and running. Rather interesting. It's like a catch-22. How do you know that half of crime isn't reported? And subsequent to that, doesn't that depend on the level of effectiveness of the local police force? Depending on who thinks, can I be bothered to report it? Nothing happens. So I'm trying to understand. It's a bit of an enigma, this. I don't...
Thanks for the question, Tony. That's a fairly simple answer to give to you. You may not be aware, but most of that we have on that, there's what's called the National Crime Survey of England and Wales. And that's done nationally, and that is their considered opinion. Now, I couldn't tell you how they assess that, a bit like the survey that David was talking about, but this is done on an annual basis, and we get the reports, and it shows you where we are in a relative position, but that is their general comment that over half of crime and things are not reported. Now, that's what they say. I have to believe it, I suppose. But I can also say anecdotally, from public meetings and talking to groups, people say, well, this happened. Did you report it? Well, no. That comes up, and I can't quantify that, but that's an interesting point. Well, we didn't do it because we didn't think it was worth it. So it's quite a difficult point, but that is the standard application. That's from the nationally run Crime Survey of England and Wales. There's also the Office of National Statistics, also tends to verify that as well. So that's how we do it.
Okay, it doesn't not. Anyway, not an issue. I was just, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, I'll come back to you now.
Thank you, Chair. Again, on the topic of engagement, how do you make sure that there aren't any gaps in getting information from certain parts of the community? What sort of data do you collect on whether it's geography, age, rural, urban communities, deprivation, or seldom heard from groups? And are you able to identify gaps that you think, oh, there's that bit of a community that we haven't heard from?
That's a heck of a question, Joe, but an important one. So the answer to that is partly through this SBOS group, the Suffolk Office of Data Analytics. We use that as well. It's not a perfect solution, but it's certainly using that data does help. If you look at the, what do they call it, the indices of multiple deprivation, that is something we take into account. So when we're awarding some of the grants, because we can't support everything, that will certainly help tip the balance one way or the other. That's important. As regards, I suppose, looking at the different groups, if you look at ethnic minorities, that's why the regular meetings I said earlier with organisations like BSC, Multicultural Service, ISCRI, Sikh Temple, Romanian community, whatever it happens to be, we do try to engage with people to get some feedback. So, for example, you will find in some communities they want a greater police presence for whatever reason. If you take the Multicultural Festival at Alexandra Park, held at August Bank Holiday weekend, make sure there is a police presence there. Now, a few years ago, there wasn't. Well, that's not good enough. So from now on, because of the way, why aren't the police there? You've got to engage with people. And when you get a format like that, really important. And I can remember in your neck of the woods over at Haverhill, one really, really hot day 2 years ago, there was a multi-age event. I went there with the local police were there. So I think that's very important. When you have these events that are on, where you know all sorts of different organisations will be there, you've got to be there. And that will help with that. For specific initiatives, I've always said, for example, let's take Phoebe, who deal with domestic abuse and violence for ethnic minorities. So regular meeting with them once or twice a year. If there are specific people that they want you to speak to, or groups of people, then we will do that. So we use them as a conduit, and of course yourselves, all being councillors, and any councillor for that matter, representing your community, feedback from them is really important. So it's not a structured way as such, but that's really how we do it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, can I just come back on that? So would you perhaps describe it, and I don't mean this to mischaracterise what you do, it's more incidental where you find opportunities you do, or is it more mapped so that you can actually see, we haven't done this community for a while, and,
yes,
and we need to make sure?
Yeah, that is definitely the case. So if we feel we haven't had a dialogue for, I don't know, say a year with a particular group, we'll make sure we do it, definitely. Yeah, and that's with young people's groups, wherever they are, even if it means, well, if you have to make the effort, I don't know, say to go to Brandon or something, we do it, because that is important to do that. And as I say, anybody's welcome. If they open book there, if you'd like us to come and see you, well, we'll fit it in the diary and we'll do that. And I really don't mind where it is in Suffolk, absolutely.
Thank you. I'd just like to make my own questions and comments. In your performance framework, at the beginning where we've got like the summary of, you've got some bullet points of things you're going to be looking at. And under the topic of theme 3, one of the bullet points just simply says number of engagement activities. And really, I'm a bit concerned that if the number is all that you're, that is what one of your priorities, is it not, would it not be more appropriate to have the nature of the engagement activities? More isn't necessarily better. And I'm just a bit concerned that it just says number of engagement activities. And then when I look through the detailed table within that performance framework, I can't find anything about number of engagement activities. So there appears to be a little bit of a mismatch, and I just wonder whether you've got any comments on that.
Well, we'll have a look at that, but I always go on with my notebook and so on to take down points that are raised, and we do seriously take them through. I suppose the thing there, Sarah, is, well, yes, okay, we could do more on that. I couldn't give in theory you could give a feedback for every single meeting you go to and what you've done as a result of it, but I think that would be rather burdensome. And sometimes if you are meeting 3 or 4 organisations who've got a common purpose, then you collate them together. So that is something, that's one of the reasons. I mentioned at the beginning of domestic abuse and violence, the EDVA service, there was a collection of information from all the different groups. There wasn't nearly enough being done on it. Well, we better take that away. Of course, it's not just, I'm not in the business just going for a meeting for the sake of it. And I know that's not what you were suggesting. It's having that evidence there to do that.
No, I mean, whilst we're on this topic, because I think our scrutiny area 3 of actions arising from public meetings is really where we're all trying to sing from the same hymn book. And I just wonder, I mean, I'm no expert on public, satisfaction surveys and things, but is part of the reason that you don't get as much engagement as maybe you would like to have is because people think, what's the point? And I realise it's a big onus on you. As you say, you can't summarise every time you meet somebody and what they've said and what you're going to do about it. But maybe if there could be some way of publicising the fact that you've listened to all these people in this public engagement activity and some explanation about what you might try and do, obviously you can't do everything, but if there was some analysis of the fact that, look, we've listened to you, we're going to try and do this and it might not work, but is that ever publicised? And I just think if it is publicised, maybe more people would engage, and maybe then they would also have more confidence in the police force.
Yeah, we can take. Yeah, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, yeah, just very quickly. We do feedback on some of the issues, but they tend to be themes. So, for example, when people have been recently complaining about firearms licensing, an example that Tim has used, when we do any publicity, we say this is because. But it probably gets, I appreciate it probably gets lost there. We do have an engagement activity plan every year where we list all the organisations we feel we should speak to, and then we try to plot them so that we do get out to as many people as we can, not just wait for people to ask us to engage with them. I think, I want to make that quite clear that we do have a plan, and in that plan we do also list what the issues, but they are literally bullet points, and then we look at those from the themes that we're thinking people are complaining about, ASB in their local areas. So then that gets raised with the chief in our week conferences, for example, where we say this is a particular issue, what is going to be done about it? Or we talk to the inspectors at the time, because I think maybe something that gets missed is that in most of these events, we have police officers with us. So if local people are raising a particular issue, it gets dealt with by the constabulary. It doesn't come into our office. We are, the PCC is the conduit to get people to come to that event. But if there's a police officer with us, they take that issue away with them, because more often than not, it is an operational issue. People don't tend to come to talk to us about our commissioning. They would talk to us about an issue that's happening within their community. And just to go back to the point that Councillor Bentley made about reporting, it is those small street meets and those sort of informal meetings where they really encourage people to report, because if people don't report, then the inspectors can't task them because it isn't seen as being a particular issue. And those face-to-face that we have with people often go back into the constabulary rather than staying with us, because we don't deal with them operationally.
I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I do think it would be good if there could be more back feedback to the community. Look, we listened to you, we've talked to the inspectors, and this is what's going to happen, just so that they know that there's someone else talked about it, closing the loop or whatever. I just think it's something that I think needs some work done on it.
It is a really good point, and we have done it before. We used to go, when we went back to our public meetings, if we did them in the same areas, we used to do basically 2 sides of A4 that said, you said, we did, and they were just bullet points again, but just to explain, and I think that's a really good point, and I think probably something that has fallen through a gap somewhere.
Thank you. I think Simon's got his hand up again.
Yeah, I think you just actually answered. I was about it is as simple as that. I think the other point I would like to make is, I know you talked about the operational element of people at street meets and other things. I think I suppose what we're looking at, and our role is to scrutinise the officer of the PCC, not necessarily the constabulary, so we need to be careful about. But it's how those operational issues, you look at them strategically and say, okay, this is now an issue. This is something that is going on across Suffolk in a number of areas. We're pulling that together. And actually, do we need to look at our kind of needs analysis and our strategic kind of PCC and our plan to say, well, actually, we are now seeing a change in behaviour or a change in need across Suffolk or in certain communities that we need to build into the plan. So I do think there is We don't want to get into the operational, and that is for the constabulary to deliver and to question, and that's very important that they engage with the communities. But I suppose what I'm really interested in is, through that communication, how you evaluate the impact on needs in our community, which then directly kind of crosses into the strategic planning cycle. And I suppose it's about, you know, how are we making it better for our communities, that whole essence of how that feeds in. And then how we get back to our communities and say, this is a theme, we've identified it, and we've now changed the plan, or we are looking at, or we can't do anything about it because that's a national issue, or that's a funding issue. You know, we can't always do everything. I do accept that. But I'm just really interested to see how you evaluate that and how that feeds in and how then that is communicated back to our communities.
I think that is a good point. Darren may want to comment in a minute on that as well. I suppose it's the documentation that we perhaps do internally. We could share that more externally. So, for example, I can remember a couple of years ago we had a meeting with the regional managers of Lidl up in Lowestoft, who were saying, look, there's organised crime getting involved in this. They were coming in targeting stores, and we passed that on. Eventually the constabulary did decide to take notice of that. A bit of a shame really, because we pointed that out, and I'm not saying it was ignored, but well, they hadn't got any evidence of that. Now the interesting thing there, Simon, was that actually one of the local PCSOs was with us, and he said, well, they're absolutely right. And I think sometimes maybe we should have pushed more on that. We brought it up at a weekly conference. Yes, things are being done on that now, and that's part of the sequel 2 years later with the town centre teams. But organised crime, in my view, from a personal point of view, that is just but one subset of all the bad things they get up to, because they're involved in everything, be it fly tipping, waste crime, people trafficking, illegal immigration, the whole lot, fraud, you name it. And very often, if you, as I understand it, if you get hold of them in one area, then you can start to break a gang up for their other activities. And maybe we could have perhaps on retrospect say, look, we've got this evidence. They are targeting stores with distraction, burglaries and gangs doing it, linking in at the time, they said, with unscrupulous hospitality facilities. Now, I don't know who they were, but there was a policing presence there. But maybe that's something we need to be more assertive about, I think. But we do pass that on, and all those sorts of things get discussed at weekly conference, and it's up to the constabulary to take it forward. So, yeah, I do take your point on that.
Yeah, and I suppose it's, yeah, thank you for that. And I think that's a good example of then how that's followed through, and how then you're giving the public the assurance that the constabulary have taken that forward. And I think that's, you know, that's the element I think we would like to, you know, we're here to scrutinise how you are assured that the constabulary are doing their job. We're not here to review them, we're here to review your kind of role in that. So I suppose, I think, yeah, and I think it's good that you've kind of identified that maybe do a bit more. And I suppose that's what we'd like to see, how we do that going forward and how that gets put into a report to this, or discussion at this panel, I don't know. But I think it is key that, you know, those things you identify are then picked up, because we want to see the impacts on our communities. That's the key, really. For me, it's not the number of activities or the inputs or the number. It's actually, is your communication engagement having a direct impact on recorded or unrecorded crime and disorder and those issues in our communities?
Well, I think we're sort of getting towards the end of our discussion about your public engagement activities and all the public meetings. So we'll briefly go on to discuss the new website, and then we're going to come back and we're going to try and formulate some recommendations. And I think that something about feedback will be involved, but we're going to try and think of a succinct way of wording it. Councillor Love, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, please. Just following the last point, this has been, a lot of questions are being asked of us, following the arrest of a number of far-right activists recently by counter-terrorist police. So, am I right in thinking that the police and crime panel, yourself, are totally disassociated from the process, of disseminating information about what's happened? In other words, I'm saying, is it working at a different tier? Because we're being asked a lot of questions. What's going on? What's this? What? We haven't got a clue. Nobody's got a clue. Nobody's said anything. So can I just ask, is that above your pay grade for saying something?
Again, Tony, it's a bit of both. So there have been press releases about what actually happened. You're talking about the Shrubland Hall event. So let me just give you a very brief resume over what happened. So that was first raised with me as an issue some time ago because of what was reported on social media when I actually attended the Crowfield Parish Council annual meeting by request. And it wasn't 100,000 people because I hadn't heard that. So as a result of that, I raised it with senior officers exactly what's happening here. They did tell me, well, there's been the safety advisory group that sat to scrutinise it, and I presume you know what that is. If not, that's where it's a multi-agency approach involving the county council, the relevant district council, which was mid-Suffolk, fire and rescue, police, probably health as well, I think. And when you have this assessment of any major event like that, be it the Suffolk show, be it a football match or whatever, a few years ago the Ed Sheeran concerts held at Chantry Park, they will look at all of that and what are the risks, etc. They will tell people, advise the event organisers, this is what you need to do to improve it or make sure it's safe. So I don't get involved in the actual details of that. What I do, what we do, is ask, has this been settled properly? And I was assured, I happened to speak to one of the directors of the county council the other day about this. Yes, the safety advisory group all sat, the councils were quite happy, everybody was happy. So that was a little while ago. Interestingly, the landlord of the Sorrel Horse, the pub that I know fairly well, having lived in Suffolk all my life so far, contacted me. There was a bit of concern locally. So, as it happened, Sarah and I went to meet the organisers at Shrubland Hall before the event, 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. They reassured us. We had a very good constructive conversation. They got separate security, they got travel plans and all sorts of things like that. I reported back to the landlord at the Sorrel Horse. He was quite happy. Also, of course, reported back to the relevant senior officer in the constabulary, and that was all done. Everything was fine. And it was reassuring to local people that I contacted as well on that. Now, when the event was held, there'd been no difficulty at all. It was about 10,000 people. This is an annual event held around the world, and it just so happened that Shrubland Hall this year was chosen. The Safety Advisory Group was quite happy. They got everything in there to make sure people were kept safe, which is fair enough. And then, and this is where it gets slightly fuzzy from my point of view. You asked me a question, answer it. So there was a intelligence gathering, which has nothing directly to do with me. I don't get involved in that, of course. That there was a risk of a serious incident. And as a result of that, the event was, and this was all put on the media publicity that did go out, which we get copies of all that. So the event was curtailed early on the Sunday morning. People left and they were all safe. And what happened after that, because of whatever this intelligence was, for extreme, well, extremists wanting to go and cause trouble, I don't know the details. I signed the Official Secrets Act, but there is nothing else I can tell you because I haven't actually got it. What I do know is, a result of that, counter-terrorism police took over the event, and or the policing of that, and I think I'm right in saying there were 12 arrests made from around the country. The person who was arrested in Suffolk, I just want to be quite clear, actually is not a resident of Suffolk, all right? Just to reassure you. Counter-terrorism policing, they have now taken over everything from that. There was a closure meeting involved the Safety Advisory Group, I think on the Monday or Tuesday, and they're now no longer involved. Very pleased to say there was no major incident with anybody getting hurt or anything. It is now up to counter-terrorism policing to follow up whatever they're going to do with the 12 people they arrested, or anything else that happens. That is at no cost extra to the Suffolk taxpayer, by the way. So counter-terrorism is a separate organisation. They will be doing all of that. The other thing I could just do to reassure you, and I can't go into details per se because I'm not allowed to, but we have to do this on trust. So we have a briefing, I think, every quarter on the potential terrorist situation across the eastern counties. What I can say is that the threat level and the interventions made in Suffolk, without going into detail, are extremely low, barely registering. I can't say any more than that. You'll have to take that on trust. But we get a regular confidential update. So I just want to reassure anybody listening to this, everything possible as far as we can see is being done to keep the threat level at the very low point. So that is chapter and verse of what I actually know. If you get any further questions, I don't think there's anything else I can say. There will no doubt be media releases by counter-terrorism policing if there's anything to follow up. Various people no doubt will be released or charged, nothing to do with us, and if there's anything further to report that would be relevant, then that will be in the public domain. I just want to reassure anybody, I can understand why you ask lots of questions, but that is the actual situation.
Thank you very much for that. Of course, chronologically, it explains a lot of things, what happened, the order it was put in. We have some other, we asked a lot of questions and had a lot of reassurances, but that's very good. I'm very grateful for that, and I know that there's a remit above this, which you're not. Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was interesting to hear about the what all of the procedure anyway. So if we now move on to our members' views on the OPCC's new website, and I know that Councillor Chester mentioned right at the beginning, is it up to date? And I've just looked today, and you've got 3 news items this week. So the news items are looking like they're up to date. It's not like you log on and it's last month, so that's good. So if anyone else has got anything they'd like to comment about the website, now would be the time to do it. But we all think it's a big improvement, and I did ask our new members of the panel if they got a bit of time to explore your website, because it's a source of information, and clearly if they're new to the panel, they don't know what, maybe don't quite know exactly what the role is or what the role of the panel is, and whether that information could be found on the website. I haven't had any comments, so it would be good to hear from anyone who has recently had a look at the website for this, like the first time. But anyway, Simon's got some things to say.
Yeah, it was just more about specific, and I suppose for Sandra. I mean, we spoke previously about feedback on number of users, number of hits, whether that's improved, any feedback that's been received through the website. Is there anything you can share? I know you said it's limited in relation to previously, but I just wondered if anything else had come in the kind of time previously.
I haven't got the stats at my fingertips, but anecdotally, the support that we've had from people who've looking at their website has been really positive. And in fact, which day was it? 2 days ago, we were interviewing for the replacement for my post. And obviously, we asked those candidates what they thought about the website, and that was really very positive. I know some might say that they're not going to criticise us, but it could have given you, it might have given you something, for looking for a job. You might say, I could improve it, but it was very positive. They thought that the feedback we've had is that it's written in a much simpler way. I think our previous website there was an element of legalese through it, shall I say, and we've cut that. It's easier to read on phones and tablets, which the old system wasn't. For the new members, if you turned your phone around, it just did a dance. You couldn't read it. So it has the feedback we've had back so far has been really good. We did say that sort of for October time, obviously you won't hear, but we would come with the stats of the footfall. We always direct people to the website for public meetings, and so you can see the spikes, but we are never going to have hundreds of thousands of people looking at our website. We do appreciate that, but it is a good source. I think of it more of it's a shop window for the OPCC, but it's also a very detailed filing cabinet, and hopefully any documents that you need to find, you can now search much easier because you can search on a PDF, and that has actually made a big difference to us in the team because we always know we can find it, whereas before you might want to look at workforce, but you'd have to know which accountability meeting workforce went to in order to be able to find it. Now you can just type in workforce and the document comes up. So it's a much more effective filing cabinet for us.
Thank you for that, and I think that was quite a brave question to be asking as you were going out the door as to what they thought of the new website.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to the engagement loop that I asked previously, because I think there's an opportunity on the website to actually talk and feed back to residents what changes occurred or what the outcomes were from the issues that were raised. And I don't necessarily really see that on the website, and I think there's a good opportunity. Equally, you can't necessarily give feedback on every individual thing. I don't want to ask something that is unreasonable, but I think there is an opportunity, whether by topic or whether by area, there is an opportunity to have some sort of update on what has been raised. And
can I just come back before you answer, actually, because I've just clicked on, I got your events calendar on my computer, and I've just clicked on the past event of the Suffolk show, and it is literally a past event, and it says that you will have a meet and greet and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just wondering whether that's the sort of place you could actually put a little summary that, 250 people came and raised issues about speeding, and we're going to investigate this with the road traffic police or something, just so that a little, just as you say, one liner, a bullet point about what the main issues that were raised at your meet and greet at the Suffolk show could actually be in that item on the Suffolk show. I absolutely agree. Because it's sort of what we do for accountability, isn't it? And for AP, there is, the details are there. It is an event, but you've got all the papers there. But going back to Councillor Mason's point, I think an area where we can do a "you said we did" would be really helpful. As we were talking about it earlier, I thought that's a page for the website, not just 2 sides of A4. I've got 10 days now to sort that one out, but I do think that might be useful, even if it is just bullet points, because, to be honest, people are not looking for massive detail, or if they want that, they can find it. They can ask for it, but I think just a simple, these are the things that were raised and these are things that we did, accepting that it's not immediate. But even if it's, we listen to your concerns and we are going to investigate this with whatever team it goes to, at least people then think, oh, it was worth me saying it, because they are going to look at it, even if they're not going to do anything imminently, but it just makes people feel like their views are valued, and you are going to look at them. But similarly, you could just say, because this bit about the Suffolk show just says there will be a meet and greet where you are, but why not just have a couple of lines saying, very successful event, so many people came and talked to us, and we got a lot of views, and we're now considering such and such. It just doesn't need to be an essay. No, I absolutely agree, and I think the new website actually gives us more ability to do that, because before, and I know that this was a point that you had brought up several times, Sarah, it was the event said one thing, it was literally a date and a place, and then the details of the meeting was somewhere else. You couldn't put, where if you look at it now, if there's an accountability meeting, it says it's accountability and it links to the papers. Everything is in one place, which we couldn't do previously. So maybe that's the next step beyond that now, that we have that capability on this website. Thank you. Simon, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, just to feed, I think that's an excellent suggestion from Councillor Mason, and I think when you're out in the meets, if you inform people that's how you're going to feed back to them, actually you're actually driving them to the website to say, okay, we will identify the key themes, not every individual one, and actually our response will be on the website, on that page, and then people can see that you have done something, and you haven't got to then try and communicate back with every single person that's raised the issue. They know where the response is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Franstine.
Yes, I just wanted to know your public meetings, where can you find them? Because I've tried to find the last APP meeting recording, and I don't see any recent ones for this year on YouTube, and I don't know where to look for them on the Police and Crime Commissioner's website. I've just tried to look again, and I can't find it. And maybe it's me showing my age, but I can't find it.
It should, the video should be on the page with the papers. I shall have a look now, but that's the process. The papers and the video is placed on the same page.
So go into documents.
Shall I? Do you want me to do it now, or shall we?
I've just tried actually.
Don't do it now. Just you can show it to me afterwards. But I first went onto YouTube to find it. It shows that this meeting is happening now on YouTube, but I can't find past public meetings.
It is on the website, and if you go to the APP, I've just clicked on the APP, and it's come up with some links to the agendas and the business thing, and then there's also a video that I presume I just pressed the play button if I wanted to watch it. So one of us can show you how to do it later. Councillor Smith-Lyte.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Super brief. I just want to corroborate your suggestion from Councillor Mansel. I think it's an excellent idea. Sorry, Sandra. And apart from that, I just want to say it is an improvement, and I think it's pretty good. Certainly improvement on what we had before, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Could I just... Sorry, could we just broaden it out slightly to the social media, because we've also increased our social media. So I'd be interested if the panel members had any views on that too.
Unfortunately, we haven't got Councillor Bennett here, and I know it's one of his favourite topics is social media, and unfortunately he's not well, so he's not here. And we're missing him, because I'm sure he'd have something to say about social media. Has anyone actually logged on, deals with the social media side of things that can make a comment? Councillor Mason?
Just that I would say that video form content has a wider reach than static content, and I would certainly encourage you to make it more engaging. The algorithm favours video, and sometimes I feel that some of the stuff that comes out is a little bit too static.
Have you noticed we are doing a lot more videos now, because we're using Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, so we have quite a few videos of Tim talking about various issues, which I absolutely agree does have much wider appeal than just a static post.
And there'll be one from the meeting at Haverhill. I haven't posted that yet, but that was only yesterday. Just don't want you to lose out.
And presumably on the social media, you do get, you can get some stats about how many people have looked at it. So will that be coming forward when we have the report about we're going to have a report about the stats behind the website? Can we also have reporting on the stats from your social media engagement? If nobody else has got anything to ask questions or comment on, we now need to formulate some recommendations. And I think we definitely want a recommendation about, I'm not quite sure how we word it, about getting some means of feeding back to the public about what has happened at the public engagement sessions. But I'm struggling to put that into a formal set of words, so I'm looking to somebody to help me.
Well, it's not actually me. I have helpfully just had an email from my colleague here with a perfectly phrased recommendation from our Vice Chairman, which is that the PCC provide an annual update on the key themes identified through his engagement activities and how these have influenced his strategic plan and how these were fed back to the relevant communities. I wondered if you wanted to add something about and how they can be best publicised to the wider public, something along those lines.
Well, unless we'd have that as one recommendation, and then a second recommendation about making sure that it is publicised via the website and/or social media channels, and that people if they come to an engagement session, they're told that they can look back at the website to see what the outcomes were.
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor.
Thank you. It may not be appropriate, but could we possibly throw in that brief discussion that we had where we value the contribution that community police officers make in terms of reporting back to, for example, parish councils, and for that work to be developed and continued? Is that...
Can we add that into a recommendation about feeding back to the public, whether it be via social media, website, and/or the community policing in community, or is it something completely separate?
Yeah, I think the councillor is talking about the PCC sending a message to the constabulary of how much that parish councils value the attendance of the officers and encourage them to do so. So, yeah.
And then I've got Simon and Councillor Allen.
Yeah, can I go back to the perception survey again? As it's going to be an ongoing or a rolling process, can we have regular feedbacks as to what the public are thinking, so that we know that the police's priorities are broadly in line with what the public are thinking? Because it's not necessarily the same thing.
Is that separate from what we've got already?
I think that links to the public perception survey that Darren was talking about earlier, and how there's going to be quarterly updates on that, which will be fed through to the police, which will then change. They will then take that into account, and you'll be able to see from that things that are changing, and each quarter the data will become more useful. Something around that.
Is that going to happen anyway, though? Can I just come back to Darren? There is going to be some reporting, and it will be publicised on a sort of quarterly basis?
Yes.
So we don't need to ask you to do any more because it's already going to be happening, is it?
So the agreed governance process for that survey is through the Safer Stronger Communities Board, which has all the councils on it. That will be shared. Very happy to organise it to be circulated. It's going to be visible through the Suffolk Observatory, but very happy to feed it in, and you will start to see us using the data more, as we come back to you anyway, but happy to include that as a mechanism. I just don't want to overstep the Safer Stronger
I don't want to add a recommendation if it's something that's already going to happen anyway. It seems a bit superfluous. But thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, it's just going back to the recommendation. Did you say it was going to be an annual feedback of what people have said? Is that not better to be a bit more frequent? Because somebody's not going to look back in a year's time for what you said in January, for instance. Maybe I don't know what is acceptable and timely for you. But
so what we'll do, Stuart, if you put down a recommendation, what normally happens, we look at it collectively, and then we'll come up with the solution. But I take your point. You don't want to wait for a whole year, obviously, because that would be a bit.
And if you could put where you've got a public meeting that is listed on your website, as I've just said about the Suffolk show, just having a few weeks afterwards, just a very, as Sandra said, a bullet point saying 250 people came and talked to us about X, Y, and Z. And that's probably, and we're going to look into it. That's probably all that needs to be. At least it's then recorded somewhere. Somebody could go back and look. Oh, look, they've recorded that I talked to them about speeding on a B road or whatever. Anyway, Simon, I think you've got something you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's worth, that previous recommendation is taking the feedback out and building a recommendation separately around that based on use of the website or ICT and feedback. So I think it might be for the PCC to provide feedback on the relevant website. And I think the reason, so I think that's that. I think the reason I stated annually, because we scrutinise key theme number 3 on an annual basis, which is about feedback and engagement. I think we need to be careful not to get into the too detailed operational that, you know, this person said this and we did this. It's more about assuring that process is in place to give the feedback. So that was my only suggestion around feedback. I think if there's any specifics, we can then raise them at these meetings if we could become aware of results, but I think otherwise we're going to get...
I get the point about having some sort of annual, you know, when we next look at theme 3, it would be good if we could have a bit of detail about what the issues raised were and what's being done about them. I know we've heard a lot about the firearms and other projects, but maybe we could have a sort of summary of the issues that have been raised at our next time that we analyse this theme. But on top of having a little bit, use the website to help feedback after community engagement activities. Councillor Ray, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just following on from what I said before, really, can we recommend that some thoughts to give into generating some basic performance metrics with the recognition that they can't add any undue burden on obviously, but at least if it's a recommendation, we'll have some feedback to say.
So would that be another recommendation? How many have we got now? If we have one that they can look at the way that the performance with community engagement is assessed, or take consideration about how it can be assessed formally. Is that a bit too vague?
I think we mentioned, the same councillor mentioned before, a recommendation on practical ways to measure the performance of the PCC in his engagement activities without being too resource intensive, something along those lines.
So I think, have we got 4 recommendations there?
4 or 5.
Do you think you can just sort of summarise them or not? I know you've been writing them all down.
You know, I love it when you ask me to do that. I can't give you a perfectly phrased, perfect recommendation now. But yes, we've got one about an annual update on the key themes identified through engagement activities and how they have influenced strategic plans. That was then going on to talk about how they're fed back to the relevant communities, but we're going to make a separate recommendation on that about how things are fed back, including the suggestion that this is done through the website, perhaps under each individual meeting.
There's one performance.
The practical ways to measure the performance of the PCC and his engagement activities without being too resource intensive.
I think there was another one.
On the website.
Is it actually, if we summarise it into 3? I think we just got the 3 then.
Yeah,
but
lovely.
I think Councillor Love had his hand up. Maybe he's going to add something to one of them.
Don't be so confident. When I first came into the council, which was a little while ago, I was astonished by the number of acronyms, and I found actually there's a new language to be learned. And I don't know if on the website, is there a breakdown of the acronyms that are used? Because after a while, it can all gloss over you. You don't know what anybody's talking about.
We do have a list of acronyms in our report.
You do here.
Oh, you're talking about the website?
The website, yeah. There is one.
We don't have a glossary as such, but if we're going to use an acronym, we put it in full first and then put it in brackets.
As is normal. But I always find I read something and I think, and there it says the first mention of it, what it is, and then 2 pages later, and I'm thinking, what was that?
Yeah.
And it would be better if there was a centralised. That's all. It's just this is an age thing. Okay?
Yeah, I do.
You're very polite not to say it. Okay.
After I've got the hang of them now, but it is an issue. We try to, particularly on written documents, we do try to repeat it every so often, just so you're not flicking back to the beginning. But we don't tend to use a glossary as such. There's nothing to say we couldn't set one up that sort of stands alone from a panel perspective, but. There are so many. I don't even know where you'd begin.
It would be almost as bad as having to design a whole website, because every time you introduce a new one, you'd have to keep adding to it. But yeah. Right. So I think we've got 3 recommendations, which we will write down formally and make sure we get the wording right. I've lost the page after the flicking up. So we've got some recommendations. We've got regard to the information contained in our report, and we are going to make those 3 recommendations. So I think I just need now to have hands up if you're in agreement that we make those recommendations to the PCC. Thank you. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to say we're going to have an adjournment for 10 minutes for a comfort break. So it's now 11:20. Can we be back in here ready to go for 11:30, please? Was that okay? Yeah. It was all right, actually. We got our 3. We got your 3 recommendations. Okay, welcome back. We're now going to move to item number 8 on our agenda, which is a verbal update from the PCC about the estates review. This is following the progress reports we had in October and March, when the PCC advises that the initial findings from his review of the constabulary's estates portfolio should be available sometime during 2026. He's going to bring the revised estate strategy to a future panel meeting, but in the meantime, we'd just like to have a verbal update on progress with the estates review. So over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Sarah. This won't take long, but just a few highlights. I think the major development is the eventual purchase of the second half of Landmark House and the County Council. That's, for those who don't know, the big tall building near Asda on White House area of Ipswich. And within there, the new control room will be housed. I think this will take probably another 2.5 years before it's been done, because obviously all the technology needs to be put in and thoroughly tested, because you can't say, well, hold on for a minute for 999 calls while we sort it all out. I'm not being flippant, that's really, really important. So the overall cost of that project on purchase of the building, etc., and the technology, about 8 million quid, which you will have noticed in the financial papers those who looked at the last APP report. So that's really important. We've got a project manager appointed for that, a proper Gantt chart with timelines, which we will definitely be holding to account. I've asked for complete reassurance it will not be over budget. I've asked them that 3 times, and I've had that it won't be. We'll see. But that's really important. There is an overall estates review, you rightly say, Sarah. There are some complications with this, not because of doing the estates review, but because of this current proposal, depending on whether we have a different Home Secretary or whatever the new Prime Minister thinks. I mentioned about this mega forces idea. I won't go on to that, but I think you gather I think that would be a very, very retrograde step, because if we end up being part of a regional force involving 6 counties, I think Suffolk and Norfolk, the 2 rural areas, will be left out on a limb. I'm really opposed to that. I do want to make it clear, though, there are some things that should be done which do not need to have major changes for forces. Getting ICT common platform sorted out across all 43 forces, I think, is far more important than altering the structures of forces, because that should be done anyway, and it would make communication far easier, not just within policing, but with everybody else involved in the criminal justice system, including local authorities, whatever guise they take in the future as well. There's also the change to link in with that. If you look at the single public sector estate, what's happening to health, the change there, change in local government, change in policing, if it all happens. I think we just need to be quite sensible. The reason I mention that is because when you're doing an estate review, you need some degree of flexibility as to what might happen. Stick on top of that devolution for the mayoral election and the governance changing for the mayor to take over governance of both forces, which brings me to the next issue of complication. The government has talked about a pathfinder process for policing, which is an advanced stage, but we don't have any details, which makes it very difficult to comment constructively. From what we understand, there is a possibility of putting Norfolk and Suffolk together. And I want to make this crystal clear. We do a huge amount of work with Norfolk anyway. That saves 50 million quid on a recurring basis, as some of you will know. If that was an alternative, as opposed to having a mega force where we're bit part players, I would be pretty confident that would be a far better option than actually going with being 1 out of 6. 1 out of 2, where we already have a close relationship, would be better. I wouldn't want anyone, I want to make it quite clear, that I'm an advocate that that's what we should do. I'm just trying to look at what's happening. So please don't think this is what's on the agenda. Now, if that happened, and if the government decides to do it, regardless of whether one agrees, if Parliament decides that, we will have to get on with it. So therefore, some of the options need to look at what would we do if you had a merged police force. You wouldn't have 2 headquarters. That would be ridiculous. Merging forces is nowhere near as simple as some civil servants seem to think. Suffolk financially is in a much, much better position than Norfolk and most other forces. You cannot use Suffolk taxpayers' money for reserves in order to bail out others. Now, that's a phrase, all right? But we've got to be very careful about that, because you've got to get political and public acceptance. There's been no consultation on this, which I think is a mistake. However, we are where we are. Different levels of debt, how are you going to reconcile all that? As I understand it, for example, if we were to go in with Norfolk, their headquarters is financed under one of these ghastly private finance initiatives. They don't even own the freehold at the end of it. Now, how are you going to square that circle? I'm just giving you a snapshot of a few things. You've got to do a proper due diligence process. So there's a huge amount of complexity. Close to the home, as you know, we've got 13 joint facilities with Fire and Rescue Service in Suffolk. How does that all pan out, etc., etc.? I could go on and on and on, but I just wanted to emphasise, particularly those who've just joined this panel, there is a huge amount of complexity, and what we cannot afford to do is compromise service delivery because of some perception that we've got to do this and do that. We still have to keep the work going. So the estates review has got to take account of that with sufficient flexibility. But I wanted to just say that, Sarah, because that's the context. It's not me just going off on one, all right? I'm trying to be as pragmatic as I can. So if we then look at the estates, we've got a workshop coming up very soon to look at all these different points. I know I've mentioned Haverhill and a blue light hub there. If that is a model that could be replicated elsewhere across the county, that certainly needs to be looked at. We've mentioned Sudbury on many occasions. It's a great big building, far bigger than is required. It's not actually falling down. It's got potential good real estate value for selling it. But the big problem we're going to have going forward is finding the money to do all these things. Whether there will be government funding or what, I don't know. The worry I have at the moment is if what we have heard is true, that if any spending on defence is going to increase, every other department's going to have to take a reduction accordingly. Now, I've got no personal evidence of that, but we need to bear that in mind, because major investment in this state of big ticket items and costs a whole load of cash, and we've got to be sensible about this. So we want to look at proposals, ideas going forward, all the complexity about changes in the public sector. Can that fit in? It might actually help in certain circumstances, it might be a difficulty in others. But nevertheless, going forward, looking at making the estate efficient, and that's joint facilities, but it's also looking at the cost of running the estate and the affordability of any plans. If you look at, I've used the phrase many times, better use of scarce natural resources, energy, water, of course, is very topical at the moment because we haven't in a lot around. But we've got to look at that, and waste in general, how we customise that. The estate, for those who don't know, also includes the fleet. Some electrification, okay, but actually when you look at response, it's not as straightforward as that. So we've got to be very careful about going down a path that potentially might compromise service response. And I personally don't think we should do that. Look at solutions that are possible, and all of that will come out in the plan, and I hope that will be a pragmatic solution. The reason for this slight, I suppose, vagueness, it's not meant to be, is because of all these changes going around. If, of course, you could end up, for example, going forward, there are options, for example, across the blue light sector about joint vehicle workshops and so on. So we need to be looking at that. If we end up putting two forces together, presumably two fire and rescue, I don't know, and not being critical of colleagues in the East of England Ambulance Service, but that is hardly a shining example of where big is better. And I rest that there. So all of these complexities will be in it. What we will do, when we've done our review, it will have that caveat, but we will update you. But we're looking at all the different facilities, and that's where we are. All right, a lot of potential. We don't get any separate funding, by the way, for some local authorities. If you look at carbon reduction and so on, there is support there. We've got absolutely nothing for policing. So we've got to maintain the service, and we can't compromise that accordingly. But we'll keep you updated. Oh, the last thing I want to mention, I really, really hope, like we did with Mid-Suffolk at Stowmarket, where we got 432,000 quid from the Community Infrastructure Levy, we do really need to, whatever the new form of local government turns out to be. I hope it's not just Section 106 agreements, but community infrastructure levies can make a contribution, because, of course, policing and these services are part of the community infrastructure levy, as we showed at Staymarket. So that's another little area to look at. But we'll keep you updated as we go on.
Thank you. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really interesting to hear that and what you're including in the strategy. I just wondered around the environmental factors, and I don't mean around climate change, and I'm not necessarily meaning climate reduction. I'm talking about kind of working environment. We're going to see higher temperatures. We've just seen it. We're currently seeing it. Thankfully, it's dropped a bit. But is that going to be taken into consideration? Because we're looking at, next 10 years, the potential is we're going to get wetter winters and drier summers. I think it's around rainwater harvesting, and also then about how we can provide that environment for our workforce that, as he says, sitting in a very cold big room. It's to ensure that there is a comfortable working environment, that will be taken into account as well.
I'll tell you something, Simon. I, for one, personally would welcome it, because my office is like a greenhouse. The bigger part of the office has got air conditioning. I've got some knackered old windows, and that's about it. Yeah. But no, seriously, I think that is an important point, because if you're going to get people to be productive, then you need to make sure the working environment is suitable. And of course, for those who've been out on patrol, wearing all the garb they have to do when you're in temperatures 30+ degrees, you've got to be able to come back, have a decent shower, and make yourself comfortable. So, yeah, that's all part of it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've got to be. And the other thing, and you mentioned it, but for heaven's sake, just for once in this country, can we be planning 20, 25, 30 years ahead, not 4 or 5 years for some tedious electoral cycle? Well, maybe both, actually, these days. But yeah, no, we've got to be sensible about this, and we'll share that with you when we've done it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about the estates review? And are we still expecting a more formal review at our next meeting? Well, I think it's actually going to be November, isn't it?
It is now, yeah.
But will we have a written report for that? Following your workshop? So, unless there's any more questions now, this will be a formal agenda item at our next meeting, hopefully. And we'll be able to ask more detailed questions then. So if there are no further questions on the estates review update, thank you very much for that, Tim. Item number 9 is the recent decisions of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we have on our paper a summary of the decisions taken by the PCC since our March 2026 meeting, up to the publication of this agenda. There was a query raised at our June workshop, which is set out on the top of page 40 of our agenda pack, which says they wanted to know why one of the decisions about a selection of independent panel members to the misconduct panel was confidential.
I've no idea, but Darren can answer that one.
Those decisions include the name of the officer, and at that point, that is confidential, so we don't publish the decision. Once we appoint the advisors and the misconduct panel, there's a pre-hearing where they discuss whether the name should be made public or not. And at that point, the name is normally put into the public domain, but because we can't preempt that process, we keep them confidential. I have considered in the past not including the name, but it seems to be a particularly relevant bit of information.
Maybe the query was more about the process, about how you actually select the independent members on the misconduct panel?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were quite innovative in the Eastern region, actually. So we organise our recruitment and selection of the independent panel members and the legally qualified advisors on a regional basis, and we have done that since 2012, and that was something that actually Suffolk at that time had quite a strong hand in setting up. So there is a policy in place where it is to simplify a cab rank system. So Tim has the statutory responsibility for appointing the people on the panel to make sure that it's separate from the police, and there's confidence in the independence of that process. So there is a policy which is publicly available on our website, which specifically talks about how we appoint them, and the decision-making process is a key part of that, just to show that we've appointed everybody according to the policy, and there's no hint that we're appointing people who may come out with certain decisions or anything like that.
Thank you for that, because I think that was the query, is that, it's down as confidential, but we don't know how the process goes up. But if it is in the public domain, that we can see what the process is followed, then, I agree. If you're not meant to publicise the name, then you can't publicise the name.
I'm very happy to share a link to the policy if that's useful.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the recent decisions?
Sorry, I was just coming back on that point. It's really difficult because you can't read the paper to say what's in the paper because it's confidential. I suppose I was just, and I raised it, I was quite confused as to if, you've selected somebody, then surely that is known because that has, that would be in the public domain just through a freedom of information or any other request. So at that point, I accept when they're appointed, so it's difficult to know what was in the paper. That was the point I think we were making.
And always very happy to answer any questions on it. And if it was a big issue for the panel, I would be happy to give a couple of examples of the decision report, once they've been made public. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on any of the recent decisions on our papers on page 41 and 42? Councillor Chester.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite topical, really. I'm referring to decision number 12, as Tim just mentioned, the potential amalgamation of police forces. So here we have an agreement which is with other Anglian forces, Eastern forces, and it's 6 collaborations. So it's obviously successful, Tim, the fact that it's ongoing. My point being, this is an agreement which is fairly local to East Anglia. Is there a national agreement? So how do we deal with things which actually go beyond the boundaries of this collaboration, something like national county lines, where the supply lines probably go way beyond East Anglia, or something like terrorism or county terrorism? So what's the benefit of this local agreement, and is there a national agreement that's equivalent? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, there's a bit of mix and match. So, for example, the National Police Air Service is something that I think is utterly hopeless when it comes to Suffolk. In fact, it's even worse to Norfolk because it should be renamed, in my humble opinion, the Metropolitan Police Air Service. And I actually try to represent the region on that, which is impossible because the needs of North Norfolk are diametrically opposed to those on the London fringe, be it in Essex, Hertfordshire or wherever. One way through for that, of course, would to be a far better embracing of drone technology, which is going at in my opinion, a rather glacial pace. I'm not sure now with the advance in drone technology whether airframes like helicopters will be used for much longer because they don't actually carry people around. They are more for surveillance and operational pursuits, that sort of thing. Now, I'm not an expert in that. That's an example where a more customised regional approach, I think, would be better. Things like, for example, facial recognition. Now, that can be controversial, but actually it's expensive if you shared that on a regional basis. I think that's a very good idea. There are other things that we do, for example, the new technology project replacing the Athena system. I had a meeting, Darren and I, yesterday on that, where all forces can talk to each other, and because obviously criminals don't respect county boundaries or police force boundaries, some common sense could prevail there. We already do it for procurement. I don't think enough is done on social value, by the way, but nevertheless it makes sense to have some economy of scale. So I think you have to mix and match on that. So the Eastern Region Innovations Network is a form of the those forces in the region looking at potential developments where we can share resources in a more effective way. The point being, though, here, Mike, this does not impede the local identity and community policing, and that is the bedrock of what we do. So you've got the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, which, although not directly involved in the network, it is a subset of that, where they deal with high harm individuals and organised crime groups, and that works very well. It does collaborate. Then you've got the National Crime Agency, which is not directly a policing body, that sits nationally. The National Cyber Centre, there's an offset of that in the Eastern Region, which also feeds in with our dare I say it, more or less state-of-the-art cyber facility at Halesworth, which is run with Norfolk and Suffolk. So you have to look at it. I suppose I'd use the words a la carte, depending on what it is. But the bedrock of this is not to compromise community local policing, but look at other initiatives which can move forward. So, and that is completely different to the idea of ramming everything together in a mega force, which I think would be a disaster, as I said before.
Thank you. Did you want to just come back on that, Councillor?
Come back. Is this collaboration unique, or are there other forces that have regional collaborations as well that you're aware of?
Not to this extent that we do here. You've got the ROCUs, the Regional Organised Crime Units, URSU is ours. Others are good, but I would say this, but I think the evidence is that ours is the best in the Eastern region. That's just because the way we get on with each other. But no, yes, but not to the same extent, nor is there another collaboration in depth that we have with Suffolk and Norfolk either, separate. Essex and Kent do a lot together, but they're two very big forces with the River Thames and the Thames estuary in the way, but common issues there. Two very big counties, very big budgets. So, yeah. And I think that's why we need some common sense and pragmatism to evolve on this. As I said earlier, all for improvement and developing things, but please don't try and ram everything together. It's going to be a disaster. And it was tried, I think they looked at it, what was it, when Charles Clarke was the Home Secretary in 2006-8, and that was abandoned because of all the financial difficulties. So evolution, I think, is far better than revolution. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Love.
Thank you very much. Page 42, 21. I've got through all the acronyms, and I think I've sussed it out. But just what is PRAP? What's its function? What does it do? How does it operate? If you don't mind me asking.
Seen as one. Funny enough, we were just talking about it a few minutes ago. What we need to do, or what I would like to see personally, as the PCC and us as a team, what are the recommendations to improve performance? And this is not about being soft on crime or anything else like that. Looking at disproportionality, how do you actually engage with communities and make sure the legitimacy, the fairness is actually done properly? Because there are issues that, Tony, if you wanted to, you could look back over the years at the papers. I'm not saying you would do that. Because there are some fundamental issues that need to be resolved. And constabularies, in my view, does tend to take a very general view. The idea of this is to look specifically at where we are in Suffolk, and they will come up with recommendations as to what can be done to improve performance, improve trust and confidence, as Simon was mentioning. That's really, really important that we do that. And I'm really looking forward to the results. It has been going for 2 years. There's a slight frustration, I think, from my part, where are the recommendations, but actually, and that's not a criticism of the members, I think it's the feedback from the constabulary. But anyway, that has now been addressed, and we look forward to getting the results. So it's about improving police performance and making sure that we move forward together. That's the whole focus of it. And when we get the results, well, we're happy to share them with you, of course.
Thank you very much. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on the other recent decisions, we'll move to item number 10, which is our information bulletin. And the items on the information bulletin are generally not for discussion, but if there are any matters that warrant specific scrutiny, members are invited to suggest these when the forward work programme is discussed at agenda item 11. You will, though, note that under the item about the dates for your diary, there are some queries about the dates of our panel's October 26 and March 27 meetings. Suffolk County Council had a full council yesterday evening and agreed that the planned 9th of October 2026 meeting of the panel will now be held on Friday the 6th of November 2026 in order to accommodate the attendance of the PCC. Additionally, County Council also agreed that the 25th of March 2027 meeting of our panel will now be held on Friday the 19th of March to enable a meeting of the Council's Cabinet to take place on that date that we were meant to have a PCP meeting. So to summarise, the next 3 meetings of the panel will be taking place on Friday the 6th of November 2026. That's the one we keep referring to as an October meeting, but it's now a November meeting. Friday the 29th of January 2027 and Friday the 19th of March 2027, and the diary invitations will be amended and resent out in due course. And we also need to be made aware that we need to note that the PCC is currently recruiting a new chief constable, and that the panel is likely to be asked to schedule an additional meeting to hold a confirmation hearing for the PCC's proposed candidate. And this is currently envisaged to be sometime during September 2026, but clearly we don't know the date until we've got the new the recruitment procedure has been carried out. So before we move on, are there any comments members wish to make on the information bulletin? Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, just a question on that last point. What involvement does the panel have in the selection of that new chief constable?
One of our roles is that we have to ratify, if you like. One of our powers is that we have to ratify the appointment of a new chief constable. I think we have to do the same for a new chief executive, and it's similar. It's basically on the process. We have to make sure that the process that they follow to appoint the new chief constable has been very thorough. And basically, we had one of these a few years ago. I think it was just after I joined the panel. We had one when we appointed Rachel Kearton. And we basically have a meeting. We get the papers about the process, and then we can ask questions of the candidate, and maybe Darren might be able to explain it in more detail. But basically, we have to ratify the appointment of the new chief constable. If I've sort of summarised that correctly, maybe Darren can assist.
If I just add, it's very, very process-driven, whether one likes it or not. That's what it's laid down statutorily, and what will help. All members actually, when you go through this process, you have to have an independent policing advisor report, okay? So that will be shared with you just to show what the process was and that we stuck to the rules, I suppose, for want of a better word.
It's really about, have you followed the right process?
Yes.
In order to get the best candidate for the job.
Right.
Does that help? Councillor.
Very, very quickly, do we get to speak to the to the candidate or not?
Well, if we make a selection, so we've got interviews at the end of the month, we have a candidate who has got through the shortlisting process. That doesn't mean they will be appointed or that they will be, whatever. So we'd have a panel made up of 4 voting members. I think I've got that right, of which I'm one, but people from different disciplines and backgrounds. And they have to reach certain scores, etc., in order to do that. The same applied with the shortlisting process, and then you will get a chance. If we select someone, they will come here, and you can ask them whatever questions you like. All right? And then I think
the candidate will come to that confirmation hearing. That's what happened last time anyway, and we could ask some questions.
They do. Yeah. You also have a veto power in that. I thought you did. So if you don't,
process.
But that's on the process. All right? Okay.
Thank you. And now, because our next 2 items on our agenda are not directly relating to the Police and Crime Commissioner himself, so he and the officers may well leave, but we'd just like to mark this occasion as being the last panel meeting that Sandra Graffam will be attending. And I'd like to thank her for being a nice friendly face on the other side of the room, and she always seems to come with so much enthusiasm despite all the questions that we fire at her, and we've had this ongoing issue about the engagement and about the website, and I'd just like to say that I hope we haven't been too critical, and I hope we've actually helped you do the job. You know, we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. We want the information out there, and we want people to know what the PCC does. So I'd like to thank you from the panel for all the work that you've done, and I hope that you really do enjoy your retirement.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
We'll miss you. And we'll look forward to meeting your replacement at the next meeting, hopefully.
Thank you so much. I actually started as I was approached as a freelance in 2011 to see the police authority demise with Councillor Spicer. Little did I know that I'd be here nearly 14 and a half years later. But I have really appreciated the challenge. I have thoroughly enjoyed the support, and just thank you so much.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll miss you. So we'll see Tim and Darren again, hopefully. So if you're now going to leave, we just have another couple of items on our agenda which hopefully won't take us too long. Item number 11 is the Police and Crime Panel's Annual Report 25-26. And we now have the chance to review and approve the draft annual report for 25-26. The report is a summary of the activities and outcomes that we've had in the previous year. And the draft report has previously been considered by members, and their comments are now reflected in this final draft. So we have a copy of the report in our papers, and I now open the floor for the panel for any observations they wish to make. I think a thorough, list of all the things that we've done, and hopefully it shows that we are actually doing our job in scrutinising the work of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And I think that we have to now, we need to review, that's right, we have to now review, we've reviewed the panel, the plan, and we now have to formally approve that it's publicised. And I think it goes onto the Suffolk County Council website. So could you just raise your hands if you're happy for that report to be publicised? Thank you. And now our final item on the agenda is the Forward Work Programme. And agenda items are planned for the next scheduled meetings of the panel. They're set out in this paper. This is a live document to enable a panel to be responsive to changing circumstances. Can I ask panel members if they have any comment on our Forward Work Programme, which is on page, I can't find it, what page? 69. 69. And you'll see a summary of what we're intending to put into our future meetings. Anyone got any observations or anything they'd like to add to our Forward Work Programme? I think we have quite a busy meeting in November. So it looks like there's no comments on that. That's good. So we haven't got any amendments to make, but as I said, we can amend things at a later date. So thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's Police and Crime Panel meeting. The next meeting of the panel will either be the additional meeting during September, where we hold the confirmation hearing for the appointment of a new Chief Constable, or the next scheduled meeting, which will take place at 9:30 a.m. on Friday the 6th of November here in the Council Chamber. We will have an online workshop to set out our key lines of inquiry for our November meeting, and that has been set for Tuesday the 25th of August at 2 p.m, and that will be online. And you should have received a diary invitation for that. So I will now officially close the meeting at 12:06. Thank you very much. Plenty of time.